New York is electing a mayor this year. The primary is less than 100 days away. As you might expect, the field of candidates is pretty big, but former presidential candidate Andrew Yang is leading the pack. He has consistently ranked at the top of public polling. Yesterday, Mr. Yang reported his fundraising numbers. In less than 60 days, his campaign said it had raised more than $6.5 million. That includes funds matched from over 15,000 individual donors. The first Democratic mayoral debate is scheduled for May 13th. So is New York ready to join the Yang gang? And if so, what will he do as its mayor? Andrew Yang joins us now. Mr. Yang, good evening. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Joshua. Happy Grammy night. Rather be here. All the people watching, that's right. Feed that brain.
See, I thought you were going to say Happy Pi Day because you're a math guy, but that's okay. That's okay.
That's you. That's
exactly.
True.
There's a lot I would like to cover with you, starting with the most basic question. In 30 seconds or less, why should New Yorkers elect you mayor?
I'm running for mayor because I can help New York City recover from this historic crisis faster than any other candidate by helping small businesses reopen and firing up the engine of New York's economy.
Let me begin by asking you about part of that, which has to do with getting schools reopened. Schools and workplaces are very closely tied. New York City's new schools chancellor takes office tomorrow, actually. She told the Wall Street Journal that she sees summer school playing a very big role in getting kids back on track as the pandemic recedes and wants to expand that to as many kids as possible. What do you make of that? And what is your plan for getting kids back in the classroom?
I think that's exactly what we should be focusing on because I'm a public school parent myself, Joshua, and my children have also not been in school all year. And facts show that online education is 30 to 70% less effective than in-person instruction, and that 29% of New Yorkers don't have high-speed internet at home. So we're looking at learning loss for hundreds of thousands of kids, and we have a lot of time to make up. And so if we can get those kids into classrooms this summer, we should be doing just that.
I'm going to get through as many questions as I can, including some questions from our viewers, particularly about the city's housing crisis. Emily asked, how would you address the problem of New York City becoming a barren landscape of retail space and luxury high-rises that are mostly empty? How would you make the city livable for average New Yorkers again? Mr. Yang?
We've had an affordable housing crisis for years, but we have an opportunity right now because hotels right now are 80% vacant and commercial real estate in many parts of the city is also 80% vacant. Now, I've talked to a nonprofit developer who's looking to convert an empty hotel to affordable housing for hundreds of New Yorkers, and they can do that at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time that ground up construction would take. So we have to marry the opportunity to the need and get people the affordable housing that we've been looking for as a city for years and decades. Because, Joshua, when you talk about affordable housing, everyone's for it in the abstract, but when it comes to their neighborhood, then they're not as much for it. So we have to take advantage of the building stock that we already have right now lying empty.
What do you think about measures like, say, rent forgiveness or converting some of the city's public housing to Section 8 federal public housing?
I don't think anyone should be getting evicted during a pandemic. And so to me, the only question is whether we're going to put the rent relief in the hands of the tenants or the landlords. But either way, we should be extending the eviction moratorium. No one should be pushed out onto the street during this time.
Overall crime is down in New York, but attacks against Asian Americans in New York are rising. I know you've had a number of things to say about this over the course of the COVID pandemic. Give me an example of an experience from your life, an encounter with racism that you had that informs the way you would deal with race as mayor.
About a year ago today, when I started going out on the street, there was like a completely different attitude towards me, towards my family members, towards people of Asian American descent. And in my case, it did not result in anything more than dirty looks or people shrinking away from you in public. But I just talked to a restaurant worker who's Asian American who was assaulted on the streets of New York for no other reason than his ethnicity. And so there's a lot of pain, a lot of heartbreak in the Asian American community right now in New York City. And as you said, these incidents are up 900% according to the numbers that we have. So I've been doing my best to talk to the victims and hopefully bring New Yorkers together to say that there's no place for this kind of hatred or violence in New York or any other part of the country.
And how would that inform you policy-wise in terms of what you would do about these crimes as mayor?
Well, there are three things we should do immediately, Joshua. Number one is we need to fully fund the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, which right now is a volunteer group. I don't think that's an appropriate response. Number two, some of these incidents have not been treated as hate crimes, and they should be, where the fact patterns clearly show that there's no other reason that this person was attacked other than the color of their skin. And the third thing is we have to build up bonds of trust and communication between city officials and the Asian American community, because right now a lot of these incidents are not going reported. I would be thrilled to serve that role if I'm fortunate enough to be this city's next mayor.
A number of women have come forward accusing New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo of inappropriate behavior. You released a letter on March 10th calling on the governor to step aside temporarily while the investigation takes place. You compared it to an investigation of a police officer or a teacher accused of inappropriate behavior. But that letter was dated before it was announced that an allegation of groping was referred to the Albany Police Department. We should note Governor Cuomo has denied these allegations. Has this new information changed your view on what the governor should do?
I think we should be focused on the interests of New Yorkers all over the state, and we need a governor who's able to focus on the business at hand. We're still struggling with a pandemic and recovery without being dragged down by these kinds of allegations and this controversy. So we should have the governor step aside, let Lieutenant Governor Hochul take over. And that, to me, would be in the best interests of people all over the state, as well as in New York City.
It is possible, theoretically, that you could win the race for mayor and Governor Cuomo could still be the governor of New York when you take office, theoretically. If that happened, how would you manage that relationship with Albany and with Mr. Cuomo?
My job will be to deliver for the people of New York City. And to me, the interests of New York City and New York State are very much aligned. The fact is the city is the economic engine of the state. So we have to get on the same page. There are all of these issues that have been faltering recently because, frankly, City Hall and Albany have not had the kind of working relationship that they need to be able to solve some of the problems we're seeing in front of us every day.
I do want to ask you about universal basic income. That was one of the big issues that you talked about on the campaign trail when you ran for president.
I remember.
Yes, indeed. And you proposed a UBI for New York City residents. Now, this has been criticized by one of your opponents. Eric Adams, who's the Brooklyn borough president, has referred to this as a UBI. Talk about this a bit, particularly in the context of the stimulus checks that are going out this weekend. Maybe there's a little bit more of an appetite for direct payments from the government in light of what we've been through with COVID, but talk about how this UBI would work and respond to Mr. Adams's criticism.
I am so grateful that tens of millions of Americans are getting $1,400 relief checks that are going to be a lifeline for so many people. And when I ran for president, Joshua, universal basic income was very, very new to many Americans. But now a majority of Americans, 55%, are for it, and 85% are for cash relief during the pandemic. My goal as mayor will be to alleviate extreme poverty in New York City. And while we can't do what the federal government can do in terms of the level of cash distribution, we can have targeted cash relief go to keep people in more stable situations. And frankly, in many cases, it's going to keep them in situations that will enable them not to wind up in various city institutions, including our shelter system, that are much, much more costly, both on a human level and an economic level.
Briefly, how would you fund this UBI? In some places, UBIs have been funded by private donations. Alaska has one funded by proceeds from oil and natural gas exploration. How would New York pay for the UBI?
Well, we're looking at targeted cash relief that would apply to hundreds of thousands of the poorest New Yorkers. And we can fund this with a combination of existing city funds and also asking Albany to close the loopholes that some significant landowners in New York have had in terms of their property tax abatements. And I'm just going to call out one of them. Madison Square Garden has a property tax abatement that's $40 million a year just for the garden. So if we close those loopholes and put to work some of the city's resources, we can pay for targeted cash relief for the people who are struggling the most.
Andrew Yang, former presidential candidate, now running to be the mayor of New York City. Mr. Yang, pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Joshua, let's get New York City back, my friend. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Put the money in our hands. 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 Can we afford it? Yes. Will it cause inflation? No. Is it awesome? Yes. Is anyone trying to make it happen? Yeah, that guy.